welcome to our next speaker. We have, I heard he's a man of many words to start with. So I'm fearing for my life right now as a moderator before I'm beaten up. But he's an architect, an urbanist, a policy analyst, and an environmentalist. He has made theoretical and practical contributions to policies in macroeconomics, urban planning, environmental preservation and restoration, housing, public transport, youth empowerment, and labor rights. Those are so many departments for one person, don't you agree? Well, akili ni nywele. Na ni kama nywele nazo amebarikiwa. Mr. Githinji Mbugua, ladies and gentlemen, welcome him. Clap until he comes up on the stage.
Just an introduction. I'll be speaking about the economy and what role urban planning plays in the economy. And hopefully, I'll be done in 20 minutes, so that 10 minutes you can have the first honest discussion in Kenya, especially about housing. So you're all going to pay housing levy. Sometimes you're not going to pay. Other times you're being told you're going to pay. So the last 10 minutes, I hope I'll be done with these 12 slides. So in the last 10 minutes, we can have that honest discussion. You are most likely going to get offended and bored during the presentation. I'll try very much to minimize on the boredom, but offense is guaranteed. That one. So if you're not offended after this, we can meet. I give it another go. I'll start with defining what economics is. There are two schools of thought of what economics is. The first one is where the human being goes for the ego model. Ego, not eco. The ego model is where you assume you're on top of all the ecosystem, and then everything is there to cater for your needs. And that is what is basically taught in schools, where you are told the finite resources in the ecosystem are there to meet your needs. The other model, before you even go to the other model, in this ego model, you're working on a production, trade, and consumption in a line. You produce, you trade, you consume. Then you go back again and produce, you trade, you consume. So it's a linear model, yeah? Then you have the eco model. The eco model, you're not here to multiply and subdue the earth. You're part of the earth. So you consider yourself as part of the ecosystem. And in this model, you're not doing production, trade, and consumption in a line. You're doing it in a circular model. So you produce, you trade, you consume. What you have consumed goes again back into production like that. So it's a continuum. So what we will do is, for the sake of this discussion, we'll use the eco model, not the ego model. You're not on top of anything. You're part of everything. So for the purposes of this discussion, economics is you as part of the production, trade, and consumption continuum. Now, where does urban planning come in all this? Urban planning is you looking at a piece of land and saying, I want to do this economic activity on this land, and planning exactly where everything will happen. I'll use urban planning. There are many types of planning, but I'll use urban planning to cover all of them. So the slide that I have shows urban planning as the motherboard. You see, when you have a computer, you have a motherboard, and all the chips fit on that motherboard. The circuits, the circuit breakers, the display units, everything fits on that motherboard. So that motherboard has slots for everything to fit on it. That is exactly how you do urban planning. So when the colonialists came into Kenya, they looked at the entire country and they saw Lake Victoria is there, it is the source of the Nile. The first thing they did was to look for what can we use this colony for to enrich Britain. So the planning they did it in such a way that it extracts things from Kenya, going to Mombasa, going internationally. So the planning they did, if you look at it properly, it shows you the railway cutting across the country, and everything feeds onto that railway, goes to Mombasa, gets out. The only thing that is coming in is labor. So based on that, you come now to Nairobi. You zoom in into Nairobi, the capital city. Nairobi was literally planned for the European to live here and do administration, for the Indians to live here and do trading, For the African, he was not meant to live here. This was like a dormitory. He was meant to come here to work. So if you look at the colonial plan of Nairobi, you'll realize the part that was occupied by Africans was very small. And it was right next to the railway, and it was right next to the industrial area. You are here to do labor. You're not here to trade. You're not here to do administration. Even if you look at the design of the streets during colonial times, the streets were very small because they're not expecting people to loiter around. You go to town in your car, you do your business, you go back. So you are not supposed to stay in the city. That colonial plan on that slide, I've juxtaposed it to what is currently there. If you look at the areas that were meant for administration and for residence for the Europeans, they're the upper hills, the Gigiris, the Thegiris, the Rundas, all that area. They're still there, very intact. You look at the areas where Asians were supposed to trade and live, they're the Parklands, they're the Ngara and all that, still there. You look at where African laborers were put, it is Eastlands. So the layout is still the same. Nothing has changed. The only thing that we have changed is we have substituted races and brought classes. So you are either upper class or lower class. Now, the next slide shows us what is currently happening in Eastlands. Even when the colonialist was doing all this racist stuff, he was still doing proper planning. He put the laborer right next to the industrial area so that you can walk and cycle to industrial area and go back to your places in Eastlands and live there. You're not inconveniencing anyone. Now, when we came to the end of the 1970s, around 1977, around 1980s, early 80s, we had already gained independence. And what happened is the African urban planners dropped the urban planning docket that was given to them. The city started decaying, and it started decaying in Eastlands. By the time we were coming to the 90s, when some of us were living in Eastlands, now this is the part I didn't introduce myself because everything that the host said is very flowery. It is to make you listen to me and come in through the door. No, this is the part where the real me comes out. In this slide where Eastlands is decaying, because I grew up in Eastlands in the 90s. And this is where the bottom part of the decay had reached. Like garbage was not being collected, roads were not being repaired and all that. So when you're growing up as a child, you're going to all the roads and seeing garbage heaps. And in those garbage heaps, you're seeing industrial waste from industrial area, you're seeing chemical waste, you're seeing biodegradable waste and biodegradable waste, you're seeing everything there. So it kind of sticks with you. When you're a kid and you're going to those garbage dumps and you're seeing used condoms, you're seeing aborted fetuses, you're seeing all that in that garbage. Then right next to that, there's open culverts. When it rains, this garbage goes into those culverts and blocks them. Once those culverts are blocked, it means your water for laundry can't flow into the culverts. Now it goes into the sewer system. It blocks those sewer systems. The sewer systems flood and flow into your houses. So that's the Eastlands we grew up in. And during colonial times, that never used to happen. By the time it was the 90s, it was happening to us. So you ask yourself, when you're studying all these things about Eastlands, and remember we were on the better part of Eastlands, we're not in the slums. Like the way we see Kileleshwa is the way the slums looked at where we used to live. It was called Makadara. And the way Kibera looks at Makadara is the way Korogosho looks at Kibera. Kibera is first world to people in Korogosho, even right now. So what I am describing is total decay. Now, you ask yourself, why would anyone let this happen to a country, right? Where do these slums come from? And what is the purpose of these slums? So, when you ask yourself, where do slums come from? You remember again, the colonialists put the laborer here and the industry there. You can easily walk to your place of work. Slums come when you try and push the laborer far away from where he's working. When he can no longer walk or cycle to his workplace, he will look for a place near his workplace and start a slum. So what should happen is you need to put the laborer near his workplace. Right now, just look at Nairobi. Who lives closest to the CBD? Upper Hill is near the CBD. Parklands is near the CBD. Ngara is near CBD. The rich live near the CBD. The people who can drive are living closest to the CBD. Those who can't drive are being thrown away into Githurai and into all those areas far away. Kangemi, Kawangware, all those areas. That guy will look for a way to start a slum. And that is why you have slums inside industrial area, Akina Mukuru Ajenga and all those. So if slums come from there, you ask yourself, why aren't they being solved? What are the excuses we have for not solving slums? And what is a slum actually anyway? What is a slum? First of all, we have just discussed that a slum is an encampment of labor. It is a slave camp. It is a source of cheap, expendable labor. Believe it or not, all the buildings that are made in Nairobi, even the highest end building, it is made by laborers who come from the slums. So you want a guy who you can pay so cheap, and if anything happens to him, you don't compensate him. If he falls from 4th floor and breaks his legs, there's no issue. He's expendable. And then you don't even pay for him NHIF and all that because he comes today, tomorrow you are not hiring him, tomorrow you hire him again. So he's never under your responsibility. Second thing, a slum is very lucrative because it is the source of ready market for cheap goods and substandard goods. If you're industrial area and you're manufacturing soap and it doesn't pass the standards, just send it to Kibera and sell it there. It will go all of it by that evening. It will be consumed. If you have flour that is about to expire, sell it to those women, they will make chapatis, they'll sell it within a day. So slums are there to consume all the goods that are substandard and are cheap. And it is also a tax shadow. Every business you do in the slum, KRA won't follow you there. If you're going to make 1 million shillings out of every slum resident, and there are 150,000 people in the slums, and KRA is not following you, you're making 150K clean every day without KRA knowing you're there. So slums are there to be a tax shadow. And then they're also a source of political cannon fodder. If you want people to do maandamano, just go pay those guys, they go, they die, no one cares. But if one of you is hit by a canister, you appear on the news, the MOH send their PS to visit you in the hospital, you get very nice photos with the PS of health. But if we have photos right now on the internet of people from the slums lying on the floor, police are actually stepping on their heads. Some of them have been shot, and those photos are in the internet since 2017. And no one knows the name of those guys because you do not matter. You are cannon fodder. So slums are part of cannon fodder. And the final thing that slums are, they're a source of endless problem statements for academics. If you are seated there and you want to do a doctorate and you don't have a topic, just go 15 minutes in the slum, you'll find a topic. You can even say gender violence among women, fine, you have a topic. You want to break it down further, gender violence among women who like the color green, fine, it is there. Like, you'll never lack a topic in the slums. So, and it's also, once you enter into academia, you also give problem statements to NGOs. They'll always have funding for those problem statements you get there. So why aren't slums being solved? Here are some of the reasons. Okay, I promised you'd get bored, so here's the boredom part. Why aren't slums being solved? These are the academic reasons that we are given. Academia likes telling us, and these are reasons I've heard from doctorate holders. They like telling us slums are impossible to solve. And they also like telling us slum dwellers insist on living in the slums. Like you build for them houses, they go back to the slums. They like that excuse very much. And they give Nyayo High-Rise as an example. They also like telling us that slum people don't need houses. Just give them services and they'll do the houses for themselves. But I ask you a question. You're an urban planner. This guy has built on the road reserve. How do you go and give him sewage and electricity and he's on the road reserve? Then when you come and do the road, what will you do to those people there, even after giving them services? It doesn't make sense. Then we're also told PPP, affordable housing, is the way to go. Build a house for this guy, give him on a rent to own basis, and eventually he'll own the house. This guy cannot even afford 500 shillings rent. You want him to get into a mortgage. It doesn't make sense at all. And the house you are selling him, remember, is far away from the city center. So how will he be commuting and he can't even afford bus fare? Now, here's the thing about slums. Slums are not about housing. And this is an honest discussion that Kenyans need to have. Housing is not just about houses. Housing incorporates all factors of urban planning. There's the shelter part of housing, yes. But how does the person who lives in that house move from there to school, to work, to church, to visit his friends, to go and do sports? How does he move? So housing incorporates transport. Another factor of transport, how does his food come in? How does the waste that he generates go out? Where does that waste go to? How does the stormwater drain when it rains? Where is his power coming from, his energy? All that is incorporated in housing. You can't just go and say, tumetenga eka 10 tutafanya housing. Where are all those planning factors supporting that housing? This is a slide where academia gives you reasons for not solving slums. Anytime someone from academia tells you we cannot solve slums, Google for them this image and show them. That is Singapore in 1965. Singapore was 85% slum, and today it is a first world country. How did they go from slum 85% to first world country? Show them that and ask them, how are we different from that? Then the next slide now is what happens when you do bad planning. And this I'll link it to housing, but one of the main things that we're saying is that we need to reconsider Nairobi River, because Nairobi River unites the entire Nairobi and it passes through Eastlands. And why that river is dead is because it has been planned to be behind properties. Yeah? So now, this is your property. This is the road. All properties are facing the road. And then you put a fence here and the river is behind you. Once you put a river behind properties, that is how you kill it. Because people will start throwing sewage there, they'll start throwing garbage there, criminals will collect there, vermin will flow from there, and pests into your property. So the second photo there shows us, first of all, how to revive a river is, this is your property, you're facing the road. Remove this barrier. So your property is facing both the river and the road. Now the road is where vehicular traffic is passing. Business is coming from this side. If you look at that slide, the yellow represents where business is. When you block the river, business can only go on the yellow side facing the road. But when you open the river and the road, business is coming from both sides. Cars are bringing business, and this other side, your pedestrians and cyclists are bringing business from the river side. And once you open business on this side, no one will come and throw a takataka in front of your cafe. If you're selling mandazi or chapati or anything, and your kid is passing there walking to school, no one can come and throw takataka there in front of your shop. You'll ask him what's happening. So it cleans up the river. Now, when you go to the next slide, why are we talking about the river? Just go to the next slide. Yes, this slide. This is one of the most important slides that we need to keep on asking the government to implement. The green thing that is there is the river that has been opened up. It can actually connect Donholm to Westlands. It's called a biocorridor. A biocorridor is a corridor that is living. So that biocorridor, first of all, has non-motorized transport. People can walk and cycle from Donholm to Westlands without meeting a single car. Now imagine if you're sending your kids to school, you're very sure they are safe. You give them a bike, you tell them to walk with their friends, they won't encounter a car there. So it has non-motorized transport, NMT. The second thing it has a linear market. So when you're walking on this corridor, all your street vendors are along that corridor because they know 1 million people will be passing here every day. So if I put my shoe shine stand here, I know I can polish your shoes. When you tell me that I am alighting at bus station, and you've put shoe shine people in Mudhurwa, or you've put them in Gekomba, and I'm going to industrial area, siezi shukia bus station, nitembee mpaka Muthurwa nipanguziwe viatu alafu niende industrial area. Doesn't make sense at all. I need that guy where I am passing. So along that thing, there's that linear market. When I'm going to work, I get my shoes shined. I get my handkerchief or whatever, or I am buying my newspaper. When I'm coming home, I buy my vegetables as I'm going home. Why do I need to have hawkers on the side of the road when I can have them where the pedestrians and cyclists are? The third thing that we have on that biocorridor is a linear park. You don't need to go to a park. You go through a park when you're going to work and when you're coming home. So every day you're passing through greenery. And that linear park is now planted along the river. Now, what you realize also that is happening there's the orange part, that is Eastlands regeneration. Then you have the other part, that is Railway City. Railway City is 420 acres. The purple part is Railway City, and the orange part is Eastlands Regeneration Zone, and the yellow part is Nairobi CBD. Now, this is not made up. This is superimposed on an actual plan of Nairobi. Railway City is 420 acres. The plan has been released. That project is already ongoing. No one knows about it. I don't know how many people in this room know about it, but I can assure you very many of us don't know about that. The second thing is Eastlands regeneration. You've heard in the news that PS Hinga is chasing away people, evicting them from 6 estates in Eastlands so that he can do affordable housing. He's chasing them from that orange zone. That orange zone covers 3,300 acres. And all the estates there, government estates, they're supposed to be brought down and high-rise apartments put up, the affordable housing, and they're going to turn into a vertical ghetto. So unless those things are integrated, the entire Eastlands, 3,720 acres, will become a vertical ghetto. And no one is talking about it. So we really need to question the government about that. So next slide, please. I'll try and go a bit faster to create space for the questions. Next slide. Yeah. Now, this is what is happening in that 3,300 acres. This is what is supposed to happen. Currently, what they are doing, if you look at the plan, they're just erasing everything on the ground, taking it up 8 stories. So if you have a mess on the ground and then you multiply it by 8, you just have 800% of the mess. What is supposed to happen is you're supposed to clean it up this way. In 3,300 acres, a third of it, 1,100 acres, you set that aside for that biocorridor in the middle, where you have your non-motorized transport, all that. That's a third of the acres. Then another third of the acres, you do social housing. The other third of the acres, you lease it out to private sector. So if you're leasing out 1,100 to 1,200 acres to private sector, you already have enough funding to do the other 2 things. You do not need to be charged a housing levy, dear Kenyans. Remember that. The money is there. You do not need to be charged a housing levy. So currently, Eastlands is all low-rise, that 3,300 acres. So when you multiply it by 5, you take 5 houses and stack them like this, you save space for 4 houses. So that space that we are talking about is actually possible. It's not imagined. And Peter Kenneth spoke about this. Yes, this is what the defense of the housing levy is. Please note, your chief economist has said that the housing levy, 1, is not for development. And the good thing about our chief economist, one thing I like about him, whatever he types, he never erases. So it's always there for records. He has said it is not for development. So when you charge that housing levy, it is not going to build for you a house. He has said it is for de-risking private sector. What that means is when we get a tenderpreneur to come and build the houses, he needs to be assured he's going to be paid. Deposit ni hiyo housing levy yenyu. Basically, hiyo pesa inaenda kwa hiyo developer, the tenderpreneur, now he's very sure that he's not going to make a loss. Then the third thing he has written there is that housing levy is not for your mortgage. So basically, you're paying a housing levy, it's going to pay a deposit for a house which you will be asked to buy and you will not be financed to buy. So all the facts are there. We are not making anything up. It's right there. He has typed it. And you can go on X, you'll find that tweet. Okay, so we go to the next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. Now, this is the difference between affordable housing and social housing. And this discussion, we had it before 2018, before affordable housing phase 1 began. And we said the difference between social housing and affordable housing is when you do social housing, government uses public land and public funds to build public housing for you to rent. It's not selling to you the house. It is for you to rent, which means the house remains under government forever. So when you're coming from Busia and you need a house for 500 shillings, you will find it. It hasn't been sold to anyone who will charge you 1,000 shillings. Affordable housing, on the other hand, is when government takes public land and gives it to private sector for free, which is what is happening, FYI. The second thing, it takes public funds and gives it to private sector again for free. And then it sells that house, which means it loses that land forever. So if I buy that house for 2 million shillings and the rent is supposed to be 10K, and we all decide we're going to hike that rent to 15K, the poor people have no say at all. You're going to pay that 15K whether you like it or not. So between social housing and affordable housing, affordable is the orange, social is the yellow. We keep saying that government can actually give you a house for rent at half of the prices you're currently paying. And this is how. How will they build those houses at half the cost? First, consider this. Government has the land. It is not buying land. So if it is not buying land, take 30% of the price of that house down. You are not buying land, right? Second thing, that land can grow materials. You can harvest sand, you can harvest rock. You can grow materials. You can grow timber on that land. You can grow bamboo, you can grow hemp. Hemp is another topic altogether we will cover on another forum because it's a whole book by itself. You can grow these materials. So from there, subtract 15%. 30% ya land imeenda chini, 15% tumetoa. So far, sasa tuko at 65%. Government has lower cost of labor. We have all these idle youth in Eastlands. Government takes NYS, hires those youth to build these houses. Remove 2.5% cost of labor. It's lower. Then government has a lower cost of borrowing. If you go and borrow, right now from the bank, you'll pay 14% upwards, probably even 18%. Government can go internationally and the most it will pay is 6%. So there again, you have removed 2.5% from that. Then it has economies of scale. Government is not building one house like you. It is going to build thousands of houses. My time is up. Foleni sana. Government is going to build thousands of houses at once, so it's enjoying economies of scale. And on top of that, government does not pay tax. 16% gone. It's not paying tax, it's not charging you tax. Then the only thing that government has is cost of corruption. Supposing we say 20% and inefficiency, you still end up at 50%. So government can literally give you a house at 50% of what you're paying right now. Now, how do we get this done? There are two things that we keep on saying, that you can't do planning if the urban planners have no planning code, a legally binding planning code governing how they do the planning. And you can't do planning even if you have a code and you don't have a legally empowered planning authority to ensure you obey the code, you won't obey it. Currently, planners in Kenya operate on guidelines. If he disobeys that guideline, you can't take him to court. I am an architect. We operate on a building code. It is under Cap 25 of the Kenyan Constitution. If I disobey that building code and do anything contrary to that building code, the client can take me to court and sue me. But if your urban planner does outer ring road right through a neighborhood, a heavily populated neighborhood, kids are crisscrossing it, businesses are crisscrossing it, people are dying every day, you have no legal redress against him. There's no part of the constitution you can use to sue him. and there's no body that can sue him. But for me, I have. So how do you have a building code and you don't have a planning code? Then the second thing that needs to happen is that we need to restructure government. Because right now, planning decisions are made by politicians. Someone can go to Bomet and say, tumetenga eka 10 hapa tutafanya housing. And no one will oppose him. You can't even ask him, where is the road to that housing going to come from? You can't ask him because he's the one who's making those decisions. In summary, this is what needs to happen. We need to restructure government so that these 4 people have their own roles to play in government. Let me just summarize very quickly. We have the politician, the academic, the professional, and the executive. The politician is given the role of representing the people. So politician comes here and asks you, mnataka nini? Tunataka marikiti. Mnataka nini? Tunataka nyumba, tunataka barabara. He takes all your requirements and presents them to the academic. The academic, their main job is to look at the present and the past. They can't see the future. Their job is to collect data. So the academic says, mnataka barabara, They go on their field, they do their research, they compile all the data and say, if you put the road here, it will serve X number of people. If you put it here, it will serve X plus 10,000. So you have data to justify the decisions you make. So all this data and all the requirements of the public are taken to the professional. The professional now sits down and says, these are the requirements. This is the data. I will design the city this way. Now, if he's designing the city this way, he first does the design and then he does project management for the implementation because he's the owner of the design. Nimedesign barabara inaenda hivi, lazima ijengwe, nitasimamia ikijengwa. The final person is the executive. The executive now becomes people like NYS. All the tenders we have go to NYS. Tukitaka kujenga barabara, tukitaka kujenga dam, tukitaka kujenga shule, manyumba, all of it goes to NYS. No private sector tenderpreneur. Government money stays in government. So the professional has done this design, NYS executes it under the supervision of the professional. So once you design government this way, there's no way money will get lost. Because the only person here touching the money is the professional body and the executive. If at all these people, 2 people misbehave, academia is looking at them. They already had this budget. So they can easily say, the road is supposed to come from here till here. It's supposed to cost this much. It's supposed to be done in this number of months. Why hasn't it been done? And the politician also. Then final part is the politician and the academic do monitoring and evaluation of what you're doing. If you design the road, you start building it, they monitor and do evaluation and revise the design accordingly. Yeah, I think I can do the last slide for the planning authority. The professional body is not like a LSK. Just to summarize, LSK had its elections just the other day, and you saw there was a lot of political interference. We do not want elections to be part of professional bodies. If this is the body, for instance, this is AAK. AAK is the Architectural Association of Kenya. It has architects, planners, engineers, everyone is there. Now, if this is AAK right now, we divide ourselves into 5 groups. Each group has a representation of all those professionals. And it also has a representation of all ages, from a student all the way to someone who has practiced 60 years. So we have group 1 to group 5. Group 1 occupies the role of the planning authority for 2 years. So mkimaliza mnatoka group 2 inaingia. No elections, it's a rotational basis. And while group 1 is doing its work, group 2 to 4 are supervising it. So there's no elections, there's no corruption, no nothing. And it's continuous. So now, when we have designed something and it's supposed to last 30 years, we know group 1 is taking 2 years, it's supposed to reach here. Group 2 is supposed to continue from year 2 to year 4. A politician can't just wake up and say things because you already have a plan and you already know how it is going to be executed, and you have the professional body, which is not under elections, which can't be interfered with. So basically, that was the summary of the presentation. I don't know whether we have time for questions, please.
You have really given us a good presentation. And I'm really curious to understand how was Mombasa designed. You have talked about Nairobi, how things need to be done. Because in Mombasa, there's a developer currently who developed on a public land, and he doesn't want to be questioned on why he developed in that land. I know maybe you
Buxton.
know about yeah. Thank you.
Here.
Hello, all. Mine is not really a question, but an observation. Now, people like you are professional who have all this knowledge. Where are you when all these blunders have happened in our country?
Good question.
My concern is about public spaces vis-a-vis population. We know that the bulk of cities have more people walking to work, like Nairobi. And we also have a few people who are endowed who are driving. So for a decision like the expressway to be done in a city that doesn't actually need it, what considerations are in place, and what would you propose regarding urban planning that considers greater concentration on public spaces and making them population friendly?
Okay, thanks. Let me just answer the three questions very quickly. Regarding Buxton, sir, it's part of the affordable housing phase 1 in 2018. And in that affordable housing, they didn't charge the housing levy, but they were converting public land into private land. So that's the biggest haste in any affordable housing project that we have had. So when Buxton was starting, we were actually in the AAK convention, which happened in Mombasa for that year, 2018, where affordable housing was being launched. And we protested. Also, to answer your question of where we always are, we were there, we protested. And everyone was in agreement that when this thing comes, we are going to first do urban planning, make sure the housing is done properly, and public land remains in public hands. After we had agreed all this, the afternoon session started. Charles Hinga, sorry to name names, but I'll have to name names. Charles Hinga, the PS for housing, stood up, convinced everyone to disregard everything we had discussed in the morning. And he promised people tenders to do the design. And that is how Buxton got built. And right now, Gabriel Dolan, the father, he has done his analytics and he has shown that the original occupants of Buxton have not been able to afford what has been built. And despite all that data being revealed, phase 2 is going on in Nairobi and in other towns. So that is what happened to Buxton. So where are we? Just to add on that, we have always been there. Since the day we were in campus until now, we've always been there fighting, doing those diagrams, showing them to the urban planners. Because I'm an architect, I'm not an urban planner. So I stop architecture, I do the urban planning, I show it to urban planners. We talk to the PSs, we talk to the CSs, we talk to government, we talk to the tenderpreneurs themselves, some of who are even in churches, and nothing happens. So that's why this forum is important. The third question asked by Mr. Ruben Kigame, thank you very much, is about public spaces and about the expressway. We were in that meeting for the expressway. We expressed our concerns. The cost of the expressway would have actually built that biocorridor from Donholm to Westlands, complete, all of it. Because that distance, maximum, is 20 kilometers. Even if you multiply that by 2 billion per kilometer, you'll get the non-motorized transport for cyclists and pedestrians. You'll get the kiosks, you'll get the trees for 40 billion. You still have 27 billion on top. You take 3 million per house, that is 13,500 three-bedroom houses. it was possible. We did the mathematics, we showed them. No one cared. So that's the issue about the expressway. And to add on what Mr. Kigame is saying, only 13% of Kenyans drive their personal cars. 87% walk, cycle, or use public means. So when you're using 67 billion to do an expressway that is catering for 13% of the population, there's a problem there. Thanks very much.